choose peace rather than confrontation, except in cases where we cannot proceed, where we cannot move forward. Then, if the only alternative is violence, we will use violence.
His comments won him applause from leader Yasser Arafat and the Assembly. Many Palestinians worship Mandela. Posters bearing his image cover walls throughout Gaza. Others say, our dreams will come true through your support. Pupils at the Shati refugee school waited for hours to greet him. When he arrived, they lined up to shake his hand and bewildered him with blessings in Arabic. Inside a cramped classroom, Mandela received more affection. Students greeted him with a song in English. Good morning, we're happy to hear you. The trip to Gaza concludes Mandela's visit to the region, where for the first time he's been trying his hand at Middle East peace diplomacy.
While most have viewed Nelson Mandela as a symbol of a new era in South Africa, one prominent U.S. politician had no problem calling him a terrorist. Then Congressman Dick Cheney voted against the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act in 1986. The bill called for tough sanctions on the country and the release of Mandela, who was the leader of the African National Congress. It took a few rounds of votes to pass the measure, but Dick Cheney was one of those Republicans who repeatedly voted no. When questioned about his vote back in 2000, Cheney said the ANC was then viewed as a terrorist organization. I don't have any problems at all with the vote I cast 20 years ago. Zach, Cheney at this point has to see Mandela as more than a terrorist, right?
I think he does. Even in that interview, he said he mellowed and he was a good man. I think, like a lot of things, Dick Cheney is very good at this. He's very good at pointing out things that are factually true and morally irrelevant. The ANC was viewed by the Reagan administration as a terrorist organization at the time. And Nelson Mandela did, in fact, mellow after he was freed from prison. His earliest years, not really that early, but in the 1950s and 1960s, he's affiliated with communist groups, with Marxists. By the time he's actually a president, he's implementing all of these Western-style neoliberal economic reforms. Those things all happened, but just because a moral question is complex does not mean that there isn't a right or wrong answer to it. And I think it's very clear that Dick Cheney failed one of the most fundamental moral tests of his time.
Those of us who share your struggle for human rights and against apartheid have been somewhat disappointed by the models of human rights that you have held up since being released in jail. You've met over the last 6 months 3 times with Yasser Arafat. Are these your models of leaders of human rights? And if so, would you want a Gaddafi or an Arafat or a Castro to be a future president of South Africa?
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies. Our attitude towards any country is determined by the attitude of that country to our struggle. Yasser Arafat, Colonel Gaddafi, Fidel Castro support our struggle to the hilt. They do not support it only in rhetoric. They are placing resources at our disposal for us to win the struggle. That is the position.
Mr. Mandela, as I mentioned to you before the program, we also have some distinguished guests sitting behind us, one of whom, Mr. Henry Sigmund, together with 2 other Jewish leaders, came to Geneva to visit with you precisely because they were so concerned not only by the kind of thing that you just said before the break with regard to Yasser Arafat, with regard to Libya's Colonel Gaddafi, but also because of the support that you seemed at different times to give to the PLO. I would like to ask Mr. Sigmund to stand now for a moment and pose whatever question he would like directly to you. Mr. Sigmund?
I think I would be dishonest if I did not express profound disappointment with the answer that Mr. Mandela gave to the previous question, because it suggests a certain degree of amorality.
As far as Yasser Arafat is concerned, I explained to Mr. Sigmund that we identify with the PLO because just like ourselves, they are fighting for the right of self-determination.
Mr. Mandela, we have ripped through the first part of this broadcast extraordinarily quickly. There are still a number of issues that we have to take up with Mr. Mandela, not the least of them being sanctions by the United States against South Africa. We will continue with that in the Nightline segment of this broadcast. Just a quick break now. We'll be back. Clerk is doing a great deal against apartheid. Only today, in fact, his number 2 man, Gerrit Viljoen, said that the government perceives itself in South Africa as being part of the anti-apartheid struggle. Let's broaden it out.
I am still prepared to do that even in this talk. If the Jewish leader have any doubts about our stand, I am prepared to address them and to allay their concern, because they are a very important community both in South Africa and of course in the States. And I'm prepared to iron out any differences that might exist, but they must know what our stand is. Arafat is a comrade in arms, and we treat him as such. We have many Jews, members of the Jewish community in our struggle, and they have occupied very top positions. But that does not mean to say that the enemies of Israel are our enemies. We refuse to take that position. You can call it being political or a moral question, but for anybody who changes his principles depending on whom he is dealing, that is not a man who can lead a nation. Apparently, Mr. Coppel, you have not listened to my argument. If you have done so, then you have not been serious in examining it. I have replied to one of our friends here that I have refused to be drawn into the differences that exist between various communities inside the USA. You have not commented that I am going to offend anybody by refusing to involve myself in the internal affairs of the USA. of the USA. Why are you so keen that I should involve myself in the internal affairs of Cuba and Libya?
No.
I expect you to be consistent. I don't know if I have paralyzed you.
No. I'm